Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good day to you, wherever you are, whoever you are. Welcome back to another episode. Today, I've got an amazing guest. She is a networking master. She is a self made success story. She is a keynote speaker. She is a multifamily investor, and she's here to help us learn more about multi investing and growing ourselves. Let's get into this. Edna Keep is her name, ladies and gentlemen. Miss Edna Keep. Edna, welcome to the show. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic. No, it's our absolute honor. I wanna get straight into it. So if you could please, I know I ran over a few of your accolades. You got a crap ton of them. I want to make sure you have the opportunity to give the people who you are, what you do, and what makes you so great.
Sure. We have been able to build a really nice portfolio, primarily multifamily and primarily with other people's money. And that's what I coach and train people to do nowadays.
I love it. Fantastic. So my first question, Edna, and I was going through my homework and making sure I learned some things about you and what you do. One thing that stood out with me was you hit $70 million with your portfolio. And one thing I want to make sure the audience understands and talks about or kind of gets from you is what was the mentality change that you had to go through to get to that point? Because you started in 2007 and you got to where you are at now, but 70 million is nothing to gawk at, and it's not an easy thing to do if you're not mentally there. So, what mental change did you have to go through to make that happen?
Continuous mental change. I'm
Mm,
a big believer that new level, new double. Every time you're going through some changes in your life, you've got to adjust mentally. And have studied mindset for many, many years. I have a personal mindset coach because I believe if you're setting big goals and going after them, you always have new challenges coming up because I don't believe you get to grow without going through some challenges and new level, new devil every single time. So, on an ongoing basis, I'm dealing with stuff like that.
I love it. So, new level, new devil. I got to remember that one for later. That's really, really good. So what has been the biggest evolution for you in that mindset in that mindset capacity? Like what was that lesson you were like that you kind of hold on to even now that you've developed and gotten past that, but you still hold on to that piece, that mentality?
Well, that's the belief that the universe is designed to give us our goals.
Mm,
And we get them through what we think about, what we talk about, what we go after, the
right.
people we surround ourselves with. And the universe is designed to give you your goals. So set big goals, people. Most people think way too small, way too small. I tease my kids, I go, you don't take a teaspoon to the ocean, you take a bucket truck.
I love it. That's great advice, as a matter of fact. With that, so with you being a mom and being a self-made success, how has that evolution been? And I don't get to talk to many entrepreneurs who have, a full-on family. They've gone through it with the family. Like that's in entrepreneurship. That's an entirely different thing than doing it when you're single and you're by yourself. What has been your big keys to success with managing what you do on the outside of family and then managing the family as well?
A big thing that we've done is not try to do everything ourselves.
Right.
A lot of people think that you have to do everything yourself. I surround myself with really great people, and they do a lot of the stuff. Like I've got assistants, I've got people that work for me. They get me on social media, they get me all over, YouTube, and I've got teams that manage our portfolio too. Like I don't do that on a day to day basis. My biggest role has been raising capital over the years, and that's been our role managing that part of it. So we generally don't manage the day to day operations of any of our real estate stuff either.
Excellent segue, Edna. That's exactly what I wanted you to say. So you talked about how you're not doing a lot of stuff and you've learned the capital raising part of it, which is super, super interesting to me personally. I'm in the middle of dealing with some multifamily things. I got to do a capital raise and all this great stuff. And the first one. So for those who are starting out with the capital raising process, the capital raising idea, what are kind of your rules for success for them to achieve whatever number they're after?
Well, they have to get a certain level of confidence, and you
Okay.
don't get confidence without knowing your stuff.
I agree.
That doesn't mean you have to know absolutely everything. There's a lot of team members that we rely on for, support as well, like inspections and environmentals and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to do all that ourselves. And I think that's the biggest thing for people. They get involved and they think of all these multitude of things that they have to do
Right.
when in reality they don't. The best thing we can do is focus on what we're good at and surround ourselves with like-minded people, because if you're not if people I find that struggle the most are in a day-to-day job,
Mhm.
and they might get an interest in multifamily, and they'll say something like, they might tell a coworker, I'm going to buy a multifamily. And they go, oh,
Right.
you're crazy. Who do you think you are? What makes you think that you can do that? So being around like-minded people is so very important. And we
Right.
did that right from day one, and hired a coach to help us through all the challenges too. And all that kind of stuff helps.
Right. So you've got quite a. You sound like you've mentioned coaching twice, and you're a coach yourself.
Mhm.
What have you been kind of focused on when choosing a coach? Because I know a lot of people, particularly when you're in entrepreneurship, a lot of people on a high level like you, I always hear them say, "Hey, I've got a coach for whatever it might be. I got a coach for this. I got a coach for that." What? How are you deciding what you need a coach for to make sure you're getting the most value out of that coaching?
I always look for somebody who's done what I'm trying to do. I don't need a cheerleader. I've got
Right.
self discipline. I've got my own drive. I don't need somebody to say, tell me how good I am. I need someone to show me my weak spots, my parts that I can expand on,
Right.
really see the future me. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I've actually had a coach since 1999.
Wow.
Back in the day when I was a financial advisor, I hired my very first one, and I've never been without one. And I have a really interesting stat I want to share with you today.
Please. Please.
One of my fellow coaches actually gave this to me,
Okay.
and I found it so interesting that I've been sharing it ever since. Because when I look at my numbers, it totally makes sense. If you make less than 100,000 a year, you probably have no coaches. If you earn between 100 and 250,000 a year, you probably have one coach. If you earn between 250 and 500,000 a year, you probably have two coaches. And if you make more than that, you're probably between four and five coaches. Isn't that interesting?
That
And you
is
know what?
amazing. That's a
it,
great
it's
stat.
it's if when I look back in my history, that's exactly what it was. My first coach I had, you couldn't even work with him unless you're making 100 grand a year,
Wow.
and I could see why, because you got to have a certain mentality, and he had different levels. Do you know Dan Sullivan? He wrote the book Who Not How.
Oh, as a matter of fact,
You
yes, I
probably
do. I
got
was
it.
like, no,
It's
when you notice when you said the name, I was like, wait a second, I know that name. Yeah,
yeah.
I've actually got Who Not How. I've got to finish my way. Actually, I was in a book club and we got a good chunk of the way through it, and I fell off because I had some homework to do. But I got to finish that as well. But yeah, that is it's an amazing book.
It is. And he was my very first coach, taught me a ton.
Wow.
And ever since then, yeah, I haven't been without one. And when I look for a coach, I look for somebody who's done what I'm looking to do.
Right.
Not, there's a lot of generalist coaches out there.
Mm-hmm.
They're corporate trainers, different stuff like that. But I'm looking for somebody who's done what I did want to do, like getting online, learning how to market online,
Right.
mindset stuff, spirituality. Those are all the different kinds of things that
Right.
I work on.
That's awesome. That makes perfect sense because there's like I said, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that I know that are at the high level. I just never put a stat to that. And now that you mention it, I'm thinking about the people that I know, those numbers actually remain true. I've got a guy who
Yes.
I know who's got like 5 coaches, and he's close to $1 million at this point. I'm certain going to go past that, but he's way, he's out there and doing a lot of work. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Holy cow! All
Yeah.
right, I'm gonna have to save that one for later, Edna. That's fantastic. All right, Edna. So I know you've done a lot. You've done a lot with when it comes to your marketing and raising capital, like we said before. Let's talk about that a little bit because you talked about the confidence piece, but how does one develop the confidence if they don't have a coach? Like, because my belief is you have to build some confidence before you go get a coach. You got to
Yeah.
know, right? You got to know, hey, I can handle this criticism. I can handle whatever it is. How did you build your confidence when you first started in 1998? I think you said 99. You had your first coach. So
1999.
98. So how'd you figure out? Okay, I'm ready for it. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna take that shot.
Well, I at that time had already felt I was quite successful because I come from a background where I was earning minimum wage, my first job,
Right.
no university education. I was a single mom, living in subsidized housing, my daughter in subsidized daycare, and I
Hmm.
was making 100 grand a year. Man, I felt successful. I really, really did. So when I was at a convention actually one time that our company had put on, and
Hmm.
they had us interspersed with a whole bunch of other really big performers. Our company, our small little company, had got bought out by a big one.
Right.
And one of the guys on stage, he was a coach, he said, "How many people in the crowd here have a coach?" And I looked around and it was all the ones earning 1 million plus a year.
Wow.
And I went, I hired the coach before I left that convention because I went, they're telling me something. I don't need a hammer upside the head to know that I'm not going anywhere like that
Right.
without a coach.
Right.
If they need coaches and I'm looking up at them, what got them there? And
Hmm.
that was my first foray into coaches. And I still find that when we signed up for education in real estate, which was
Hmm.
with Robert Kiyosaki's group, we took the extra step and hired a one-on-one coach to work with us too. It takes a lot of your fear away when you're working with somebody who's done what you're trying to do.
Right. Like you said before, that makes absolute
Yeah,
sense. With
yeah.
so when you started, did you start in multi? You went straight into multifamily, or did you start single family first, then going multi?
No, we started with single family. I find most educators out there teach single family,
They
and
do.
Kiyosaki Group was much the same. We're kind of taught, buy a few houses, and then eventually maybe a look at commercial. Well, we ended up with 50 doors within our first 18 months of starting, and
Whoa,
we got
whoa,
a
whoa!
few of
No,
those.
no, Edna, you're not blowing by that. You are not blowing by that. You say that one more time for the people in the back of the room that didn't quite hear you. Say that one more time for me.
We hit 50 doors within 18 months of starting.
Holy cow! Okay, how did you hit 50 doors within 18 months of starting in real estate?
Well, my favorite class in the whole Kiyosaki training that we took was creative finance. A couple other things that I took out of that, though, was not to be stuck in the day to day working in your business. It's
Mm-hmm.
very important to work on your business. So I
Right.
kind of had a good idea of that working with a coach and my financial planning practice.
Right.
And so I had an assistant that did a lot of the day to day stuff. And at the beginning we were scared of everything. We were scared of tenants and toilets and roofs and furnaces. So our first purchase was actually a condo. And
Wow.
being scared of tenants, I got a really cool story there. Our realtor took us around. We were looking at these condos. They'd actually were apartment buildings that had been converted to condos.
Okay.
And so we drove up. We met him there, and we met him in the parking lot. And we're walking through, and I noticed that the one unit right where we were walking, my oldest daughter had just moved in there.
Mm-hmm.
She was renting it. So he said, "Yeah, these all just came for sale. Not all of them, just some of them are for sale in
Right.
here." And I said, "Well, is that one for sale?" And he said, "Let me look at my list." And he looked and he said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, it is." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll buy that one because then I know I have a renter that's a
Right.
good renter. She'll always pay her rent, right?"
That's awesome. That's hilarious. Otherwise, she's gonna be in trouble at Thanksgiving. That's gonna be that'd be a problem.
Exactly. And
That's awesome.
shortly after, we ended up buying the one right beside it. And
Right.
that was because my daughter got to know the other tenants. And she said, "Mom, they've lived there for 17 years. They're not going anywhere." So I bought that one too. So that was our first two purchases.
I love it. It's nice to have somebody on that inside track. That's always a good thing.
Exactly.
That's
Especially when you're
fantastic.
scared of tenants. Like you
Absolutely.
always hear these
Absolutely.
horror stories, right?
So really, that even that fear, you guys just decided just to jump right on in. You guys didn't even hesitate. That
Yeah.
is that is
Well,
really cool.
we took our classes in June of '07. We
Mm-hmm.
made our first purchase in September. And by the September or by the winter of 2009,
Mm-hmm.
we were inducted into Robert Kiyosaki's Tiger Learning Hall of Fame for all because we'd done also a whole bunch of different strategies that we learned. We'd done lease options, rent to own,
Mm-hmm.
fix and flip. Like we'd done lots of different stuff. We went through foreclosure camp with our coach and different. We looked into foreclosures. We didn't actually finalize anything, and we did a whole bunch of deals, and we did creative deals where we were buying them in with none of our own money, where we got the seller to finance the deal and investors to finance the deal and stuff like that. And I know this is going to be one of your next questions, but
Mm,
how we got into multifamily is I was sitting with a realtor one day telling him, we want to buy 20 houses next year.
okay.
We'd already bought, I think we were at maybe 15 or something like that. And he said, Edna, why don't you just buy a multifamily? And I said, well, I can't. I don't own enough houses. That was my first automatic response. And,
Right.
and he said to me, what makes you think that? And I go, I don't know. Maybe I played Monopoly too much as a kid. I don't know. And he said, no, you can't. And because he kind of knew our situation by then.
Right.
And I said, okay, well, tell me more. So we sat there for actually a few hours, and he kind of educated me what he'd been doing. He owned some multifamily that they'd been condo converting them and stuff like this. And before I left his office, I said, so do you have one for sale? He said, as a matter of fact, I do. He says, I got one right here. I'm going to list on MLS tomorrow. And I said, okay, well, what would it take to get the offer accepted so it doesn't hit MLS
I
tomorrow?
love it.
And he said, it'll take full price offer, just what was going on in our market right
Right.
then, 75,000 a door. And so I wrote the offer before I left his office. I didn't go look at the building, didn't go drive by it, nothing. I wrote the offer, and he said, you know what? That building's actually really close to here. It's going to take me about 15 minutes to write this up. Why don't you drive by? So I went and
Wow.
drove by,
Wow.
and then I came back and signed the offer, and then we went to work on it.
Shout out to the Keep family for dominating real estate out the gate. I love it. That is fantastic. And there's very few times you get to see somebody who takes what they learned and absolutely implement it. There's so many people who go through training courses. As a matter of fact, there's a stat. You gave me a stat, so I'm gonna give you one too. So there's a stat
Yes.
that says 93% of the people who apply to a course or take a or join a course don't finish it. So
Yeah.
that's like 7% of the people that actually go through it finish it, and even then, even fewer of those are the ones who actually implement it because they decide to do other things or life happens, that kind of thing. So that's
Yeah.
awesome that you guys took that and put that into action. That is really really inspiring. So with multifamily, how I know you got into how we understand how you got into multifamily now. How did you get into the JVing? Because syndication, normally when you get into multifamily, we talk syndication, syndication, syndication. But I know you've done a lot of the JVs, and I'm really interested because the JV I feel like is a more comfortable process when you're starting out. It's a lot less when it comes to money raising because you don't have to raise as much. And then as well, it's easier to deal with one or two partners versus 7 or 8 people you want to deal with in a syndication. So how'd you get
Yeah.
into JVing?
Well, we'd actually started with the houses because we got to the point where we couldn't get mortgages anymore.
Oh,
So, in order for us to expand even on the houses, we had to bring people in to qualify for the mortgage. And the model that we'd been taught was that the investor would put the down payment, the reserve fund, the legal costs, and we would manage the deal. We'd find the deal, manage the deal, and that's what we did. That's how we started buying houses. And then, of course, when we moved to our multifamily building, it was the same process. We got the building under contract. We get a certain amount of days to get the funding in place, and then we raised capital from there.
nice. So why couldn't you guys get more when it came to the mortgages? Was it the bank just kind of decided they didn't want to play ball or anything? How'd that
Well,
work out?
generally, at least in Canada, once you all have 3 or 4 mortgages in houses,
Mm-hmm.
they won't give you any more. And, we actually I think we got 11, 12. I can't even remember because we sold some off, but I'd say maybe 12. How we got 12 mortgages. So we got beyond what most people would anyway, but we're both making pretty good income. So we were able, the average Joe nowadays, 2, 3 houses if they're lucky that they can get a mortgage. And the reason is because they look at you
Right.
100%. Can you afford this
Mm-hmm.
mortgage payment if your place goes vacant? And with multifamily, they don't look at it that way. They look at the building first and you second.
Right. Yeah, that is. I've heard that before. I've also heard people taking the route of putting it under a business name to be able to do that when it comes to the smaller single family arena. But even then, I think the way you're thinking is like the way you talk and the way you teach is the right way. Like
Yeah. Well,
getting
we had
partners
done
involved in that
some
kind of thing.
under a company name and we'd done some as many as we could personally. So
Right.
that's what we did. I had some in my name, my husband had some in his, and then we had some in our corporate name. And
Right.
but with all of that, we
It
got to
comes
a
to a
max.
limit.
And they
Yeah.
would never tell us that because we knew that it was coming. And we'd say, we still good? We still good? Yeah, yeah, we're still good. And then all of a sudden we weren't. Then it was just like, nope, no
Right.
more. And
And
we were done.
that's the weird part to me with the banks is you think they tell me, hey, tell me beforehand. This way it's easier. And no
No,
warning, no nothing. Love it.
no, they won't. They don't. They don't like to tell you.
They, they just wanted you to learn the lesson. That's all. All right. Okay, Edna. So with your JVs, what have been the things that you like and you dislike about doing the JVs?
Well, there's a few lessons that I learned. We'll start with those ones. So,
Let's go.
the very first joint venture partnership we got into with that 24 unit apartment building,
Mm-hmm.
I was actually still working as a financial advisor, so I couldn't raise capital yet. We had our own net worth that we could put at the table. We found the deal. We had some family members and stuff that ended up investing with us. But I had a partner that
Mm-hmm.
was already running a property management company. So that took that scare away from us because I thought, well, they can just manage it.
Right.
They had a maintenance guy, they had people that looked after the tenants and all that kind of stuff. So that took away some of our fear. So we went into the learning process of it because it very much was with a couple who had been through the same training we did
Right.
about 2 years prior to us. And when we met them, they already owned 20 houses. So that was the part I meant about being around like-minded people. And a thing again that kind of gave us a catalyst to growth that a lot of other people didn't get. We partnered with them right off the bat, and they took
Right.
a lot of our fear away too because they'd had houses, they were dealing with tenants, they were dealing with toilets, all that kind of stuff, and they were happy to. So we
Right.
never even ever had to get into that side of the business, and we did that quite a few times. And then at one point, I thought, well, geez, I'm raising all the capital for these deals. Why don't I just manage a deal?
Right.
You know, and then so we bought two buildings like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell you, I realized why I never did that before. It took me
Right.
6, 7 years to get out of it, but we don't do it anymore either. I do not like the management side at all.
That I cannot be upset with you about that. I don't like the management style at all either. I am the unhandiest handyman you will ever meet, and I am okay
Yeah,
with that. Right. So,
yeah, me too.
I know you're very good at the marketing, or not marketing. Well, maybe the marketing part too. You're actually developing your marketing on your IG and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
with your networking, what has been kind of your keys to success when it comes to networking? Because networking for a lot of people, for us extroverts like you and I, because you strike me as an extrovert as well, it's easier for us, right? For those who are introverted, it's a little bit more difficult to really put themselves out there. So, what is kind of your advice for both sides of the stick when it comes to networking?
Well, I say stick within your strengths because, like you said, you and I, it's easier for us to talk to strangers, talk to
Right,
people. I was like that my whole life. I found it
right.
was easy. We never got any kudos for that in school, though, did we? It was always sit down, shut up.
Yep, yep.
You talk too
Talking too
much.
much. Yeah, talking too much. Yep, that's exactly it.
You're not the good little A student you should be. I was a C student and different stuff like that. So you never got any credit for that kind of stuff in the school world. But out in the real world, you do. And I really got the credit for it when I could use that to being able to sell, right?
Right, right.
And so that's a strength. I find it easy to talk to people. I find it easy to be on podcasts. I had a technical guy that does some work with us on websites and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and the other day he said to me, oh, and I don't know how you do podcasts every day. I got on one the other day and I was a wreck. He says the guy kept interrupting me and he would wreck my train of thought and all this. And so some people find it hard. I think it's the easiest thing on earth.
Right.
So go with your strengths, what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know a master salesperson who's very introverted, and you know what works for her? She's doesn't want people, like she's nervous, so she asks lots of questions about you.
Right.
I met her at a networking event, and we became great friends because she was asking me all these questions about me, and it was like, and you know what? So that's the way for an introverted person. Take the focus off yourself. It's also a mark of a good salesperson to take the focus off yourself because you probably had to learn this as I do, that sometimes we have to be more quiet than we do talk,
Yes.
and that's mark of a good salesperson, and that's why sometimes introverted as salespeople do so well.
That is a really good point. I read a book Chris Voss actually talked about in the book about negotiations. I think he mentioned at one point people like to talk about themselves more than others, right? So when you're asking a question, just ask the question and let them go, which is actually a
Yes,
sales technique too, which is interesting. I didn't think about that in that
it
perspective
is.
though.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
great. That's
and
great.
are you familiar with Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Another book that I have here
So
in my
my
library as
19 year
well.
old, yeah, my 19-year-old daughter is reading that book right now. But when I first got into financial services, I took that course. It was like a 12-week course where,
Really? Okay.
and I loved it. And every assistant I ever had after, I sent them through that course. And that's one of the key things, that because so many people have trouble with public speaking.
Hmm.
So they would put people up on stage and go, let's talk about something you know. Don't try to talk about something you don't know.
Right.
So people had, what I still remember one friend, she said, how to make your yard instantly beautiful. What she would buy these already plush potted plants,
Right.
dig a hole, plant them. And she didn't, put seeds. She planted the whole pot,
I love it.
and it was like, so she stuck up front showing people how to make these instantly beautiful gardens. So easy for her, right?
Right.
Then my oldest daughter, who at the time she was working with me, so she took the class. She taught people how to make a Caesar vodka Caesar drink,
Hmm.
and it was something that so natural, like so easy to do.
Right.
And that was the first thing to get people up on stage talk about themselves, something that was easy to them. And if they didn't like talking about themselves, it was something that they could easily show people how to do, change a tire. I'm just trying to think of the different people that were there.
Right.
And that's what broke the ice to get people comfortable about talking to other people. You don't need to talk about stuff you don't know anything about.
Right.
And don't be scared to say, oh, geez, I don't know anything about that, you know?
Holy cow, Edna! Such good advice. I've got so many more questions, but I know we don't have a crap ton of time. So I
You'll have to
want to
have me
get.
back.
Yeah, right. No, listen, I am definitely going to have you back. I'm telling you now, because like there's stuff I would like to talk about. Like I'm really into, and I'm really being very mindful about the branding and marketing side of the business now as well. So I think that's something I definitely want to have you back on, and we'll
Sure.
talk about it after this. But I'll have you back on. We're going to talk about that. That's super important because yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, neither here. I'm getting all excited now. All right. So, Edna, we're going to do the segments. We're going to go into segments. The first segment is, of course, the two questions that we talked about before, and then we'll go into the FAQ. So, the
Yes.
first segment, Edna, talks about the troop to task. A troop to task is basically you give the listener and viewer one thing they can do right now to start their self on the path to where you're at.
Get around like minded people.
Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. I love it. All
Mhm.
right. So, next question, Edna, is what question do you wish you were asked more often? And what's the answer to that question?
Um, I think it's what is the mindset of a multimillionaire? Because
Mm,
I know those were one of the questions that I would ask. Like, how do you get to the point where you can actually believe that you can make that kind of money? And
absolutely.
and I remember taking different courses, working with different coaches, and really struggling to think, like, how can I believe that when I can't see it?
Right.
And one thing that I learned is faith and fear are both invisible. Your choice. You can choose to move forward in faith.
Ooh,
You can choose to not move anywhere in fear. And I wish more people were cognizant of that, and would ask that question, like, what's the difference between successful and unsuccessful? Unsuccessful focus on fear all day long. And that's 95% of the population. And the other 5%, we choose to focus on faith that everything is going to always work out perfectly for me.
oh, Edna, so good. Faith and fear is invisible.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Okay, I'm blown. All right, Edna, if you would please give the listener how to get in contact with you, how to reach out to you, how to watch what you're doing. I want to make sure I give you that opportunity right now.
Sure. So I'm all over social media, and my name is Edna Keep, as if you can see it on the screen. And if not, it's EDNAKEEP. I'm on all the social media channels. Thankfully to my team, I'm no good at all that stuff. I'm on YouTube, and my website is ednakeep.com, and my email address is edna@ednakeep.com.
I love it. Thank you, Edna, so much for coming on. We're going to move into the FAQ section, ladies and gentlemen. If you finished this episode, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. I'm Oliver Perry. You can hit me at the Oliver Perry on IG, on Facebook, on YouTube, the Oliver Perry Show. We're here to help. If there's any way we can help, please reach out. In the meantime, we got to go for now. We'll see you soon. Edna, thank you so much again for coming on. And we'll
My
see.
absolute pleasure.
All right, everybody. We'll see you soon.